add a couple more features here to our timer app. So what I want to do is I want to keep track of the total elapsed time ever since we started it. So for example, we can start, stop, and our main timer here will keep track of that. And up here we'll have like an elapsed timer to keep track of ever since we started, despite if we stop it or not. And I also want to kind of implement a reset button so that we can reset both at once. So let's figure out how we can do that. And so let's go to our main editor page here. I'm going to pop this panel out, and we have our objects inspector here. And basically what I want to do is I want to add in another timer. So let's go ahead and do that. So timer, I'll put it up here, and let's position it later on. Next, I'm going to add in a label. Okay, there's our label. I'm going to drag this one in as well. And now, what if I wanted to put these next to each other? Now, this is a little bit done a little bit differently in WatchOS if you're coming from, say, iOS. So iOS, you would kind of stack these and then position them. For WatchOS, considering the very tiny screen real estate, we need to know that it's done a little bit differently. Now, you might think that you can just grab the label and just kind of position it. Okay, so if I position this one to the right and this guy to the left, we should be able to put them next to each other, but no, that's not how it works. So in order for that to work, we need to actually add in another object called a group. So if we add a group in, we can see from the description here that it's a container that manages the layout of other items. Right? So that's pretty much exactly what we need. And even here, it has a little bit more of a description. You can say you can specify a background color or image to display behind the items in the group. So let's go ahead, let's bring this over. Okay, and then we can put things into the group like so. Okay, so our label is now in the group, and this we can put next to the label like so. And let's see if we can reposition this stuff inside. So label, we have it positioned right. So let's position it left, and this we will position to the right now. Okay, there we go. And now our group, if we wanted to, we could kind of tinker around with it. So we could change the layout, we could change the background. If we want to put an image, for example, or change the color of the background, we could do that. But you know what, let's put it back to default. That's pretty terrible yellow there. Okay, there we go. So label, let's just call this total. And this will keep track of our total time. And you know what, let's put this in the center. So vertical center. Okay. And you know what, I'm going to put a colon there. Total. Okay. While we're here, I will also add another button to reset. So we'll go like so, bring this button over. We will position it at the bottom. Okay, and we could put these things in a group as well, but you know what, I'm not going to bother with that right now. So we'll just say reset. Okay, so now we have our basic look. We can come in and kind of change some font colors actually, now that I'm looking at it. So total, I feel like kind of making this one green. So let's do that. Let's see here, this one. I don't like that shade of green. Okay, that's a bit nicer. And this text, let's see, let's make it, let's use our color wheel here. So what do you think? Let's go with this color. Okay, that looks okay. Alrighty. Okay, so let's figure out how we can hook this up to our backend code to get our timer working how we intended. So we'll get rid of this panel on the right, open up our assistant editor, and let's go ahead and let's create a new IB outlet, so interface builder outlet. I'm going to control click, drag it over here, and let's call it outlet my total timer. My total timer, I'll bring that over, and I'll just fix the spacing so it is in the same line with the others. Okay. So my total timer, what we want to do is we want to kick it off as soon as someone hits the start button here. But then when we hit stop, the timer is going to keep going, and just this, the main timer is going to stop. So first of all, let's figure out how we can kick that off. And because we have our handy dandy function here, we can actually just pass in certain variables to get it to function. So we'll call this function twice basically. So the first timer will be outlet my timer. The second one will be outlet my total timer. Okay, interval. Well, we'll start this one. Let's just pass it elapsed time as well, just in case we ever want to start with a different initial time, because elapsed time starts at 0. So this will kick off the timer here as soon as we run it. There will be an issue in that it'll restart every time we hit the start button, but that should be an easy enough fix. For now, let's launch this in the simulator just for a simple sanity check. As you can tell, I like to do these sanity checks just to make sure it's working. This is how I always build code. Just build it incrementally. You don't want to spend 20, 30 minutes building code only for it to not work at the end. So here we go. Start. They should both start. Yep, so they both started. Hit stop. And now this one should continue, but the one at the top will probably start again at 0. Or actually, yeah, it'll start at elapsed time. So it's not going to start at 0. It's going to start at whatever the time difference was. So not exactly the behavior we wanted. So how can we check for that? Well, it's pretty straightforward, really. We just add a little bit of logic here into our function. So first of all, let's declare a variable to keep track of whether this has started or not. So we'll put that here, var total started, and this will be a Boolean type, and we'll initialize it to false. And then down here, so we'll call the function, and then after that, we'll set the variable to be true. So total started equals true. Now in our function, we can just basically say if total started and the timer is outlet my total timer, well, we'll just return from this function without it doing anything. All right. So what's the issue here? Expected that after if. Right. So this should be if this is outlet my total timer. Alrighty. So this should achieve our purpose. Let's test it out. And then we can kind of figure out our reset button as well. As you can imagine, there's not going to be that much to it. All right, build succeeded. And let's wait for that to load up. Okay, start. They both start. Stop. And this one is still going. Now, fingers crossed when I hit start, this should not change. Start. Great, so the total timer is still going. And this one we are able to stop and start. Right, so this one basically checks if these two conditions are true, right, using this AND operator. So if either of these are false, it's going to go on and run the function. Otherwise, it's just going to return from the function. Okay, so now we can keep track of our total time. And that's going to be useful for us in a timer app. Finally, let's figure out our reset button, and we can just kind of do a quick and dirty way of doing that and just reset all of our variables and reset the timers as well. So I'm going to control click this guy, bring him over here, make it an action, and we'll say action my reset. All right, and then in reset, well, we'll just kind of initialize the variables as they were before. So just grab all these guys, paste them in like so, and just get rid of the var in front of each of them because we already declared them to be variables up above. Okay. And then we call our outlets, so outlet my timer dot set date. Hold on a sec. Oh, we'll fix this as well. So we already know that it's type time interval. Okay, outlet my timer. We'll do the same for this one too. Dot set date, and we can put it to start time. which we just declared right here. We'll do the same for the other outlet. Outlet my total timer dot set date start time. Finally, we also want to reset the button to say start, just in case someone hit reset while they were in the stopped mode. So outlet my button dot set title start. Okay, not really super efficient, but this should do the job for us. So let's try it out. Okay, we will open up our simulator. There it goes. Okay, so we start it. Everything is okay. We can stop it. Now if we hit reset, it should put them both back to 0, but it didn't stop. We need to remember to say stop for both of these. So here, outlet my timer dot stop, and here outlet my total timer dot stop. It's going to have a compilation error because of this. My total timer. Okay, let's try that again. All right, there we go. So now we can start it. We can stop. And if we reset, these should now be stopped. Cool. All right, now we can hit reset even when it's running. It'll just go back to 0. And that is that. I want to figure out how to actually use our timer to do something once we reach a certain time interval, right? So let's say you have a time interval and you want to, to start off, let's just test it out, printing something out to console to see if we can get it to trigger when our timer reaches a certain interval, basically. So there is a way to do that here, of course. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to initialize another time interval up here. So var future, let's say, and it's going to be a time interval, and this will be, let's say, 3 seconds. So every 3 seconds, or when it reaches 3 seconds anyway, I'm going to want to print something out to console just to kind of see that it's working. And then we can kind of build it out incrementally from there. So what I'm going to do is initially I'm just going to get it to start this second time interval basically as soon as the start button is pushed. And then we'll see about refactoring it later on. But first of all, we're going to do that. And you know what? Actually, before that, I'm going to create a separate function here that I'm going to call when that timer reaches a certain number. So I'm going to put that just down below here. And this one I'm going to call, let's see, function timer complete. Okay, it's not going to take any parameters. And all it's going to do is it's going to print to the console. Let's see, let's print out a variable here. So I'm going to be counting initially. So let's say var counter equals 0. And then every time this function is called, I'm going to increase that counter by 1. So counter plus equals 1. And print, we can say, let's see, timer function hit. And we'll just do a string interpolation here. Counter times. Okay, and now let's figure out how we can call this function. So what we can do is we're going to basically create a new timer object, timer dot scheduled timer, and you can see it's kind of auto completing for me. And there's a couple options. The one I'm going to go with is this one where we can set a target and selector, etc. So scheduled timer. The time interval that I'm going to use is my variable up here, future. Time interval future. Okay, target. Well, this will be self. Selector. Well, this is where we can tell it, hey, we want you to kind of run this function every time this time interval is done. So the way we do that is like so. So we give it an ID here, selector. And what selector do I want? Well, I want the function timer complete. So self.timer complete. Okay, a little strange if you're not used to this. Otherwise, user info, well, we don't have user info, so we'll say nil. And repeats, we'll say true, so that we can have it actually count up. Okay, and actually let me separate this out so that's clearer. So we have initialized some new variables up here. Now this scheduled timer, basically it's a timer that's going to hit every 3 seconds, and it's going to be counting up and running this function every time it does. That's the theory anyway. Let's try it out here. So I'm going to run my simulator, and I just hit Command R. Build succeeded. There it goes. And we should see our console also pop up here right away as soon as the simulator launches. Okay, there we go. So the console is the one on the right here. So you know what, I'm going to get rid of the guy on the left and bring this up a little bit. Okay, so let's start the timer. And every 3 seconds, it should fire the function. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, there is our function. Timer function hit 1 time, 2 times. Okay, and there you see it's just kind of repeating over and over. So that's the first step anyway, and now we can kind of figure out how to implement this in a better way. For this, we're going to need to rework some of our logic and how we're getting our timer to start here. So first of all, I'm going to kind of move this logic down a peg. So instead of just any time we hit the button, we don't want to create a new timer every single time. We only want to do it when we actually start the timer. And before that, I'm going to declare a new variable up here. So this is where we'll kind of initialize our future timer. So let's see, what should we call this here? Let's call it my timer, because why not? Okay, my timer, and we're going to give it an optional type here. Timer with a question mark. This will allow us to kind of declare it as nil initially. And this way the timer won't actually start until we want it to start, because it's technically nil from the start here. And then we can kind of say, okay, I'm just going to cut this. And when we start the actual timer, so if started, we will then declare my timer equals a timer. Right, so here we're kind of instantiating it with a new timer object, and we're going to tell it to start, 3 seconds from when we start the actual timer. This way our logic should line up a lot better than anytime we click the button, it starts. Now how do we actually stop this timer? Well, we just need to say .invalidate. And what .invalidate does is it stops the receiver from ever firing again, right, the receiver, and also removes it from the loop. So let's kind of take a look at that. So here, my timer, when we declare a timer like this, it just kind of starts automatically. So actually, let me create some space here. Yeah, so my timer equals timer.schedule_timer. So this will kind of instantiate it and also start the timer, which means it's going to start firing every 3 seconds because that's the interval we gave it here. It's going to start firing this function every 3 seconds. And then if we want to stop it, well, we can actually just say, I'll put that on its own line here as well, my timer dot invalidate. Right, so you can see it's auto-completed there for me, dot invalidate. And I added the question mark as well, just because we gave it an optional typing up there. If you forget that, I wouldn't worry too much because you'll see a fix-it thing pop up here, right? So value of optional type, not unwrapped. Did you mean to use this or that? So we'll just insert a question mark. Okay, there we go. So that's going to stop it when we hit the button again. This way we won't be creating, a million timers at once. So it's just going to kind of do one or the other. And also when we reset, we probably want to be able to stop the timer as well. So we'll kind of do the same thing down here. So say my timer dot invalidate, just in case. All right, so let's try this out and let's make sure that it's working as intended. Okay, build succeeded, that's always a plus. Here goes any minute. Okay, so we'll keep an eye on the console down here at the bottom of my screen, and let's start. So after 3 seconds, 1, 2, 3, there we go. Timer function hit 1 time, 2 times, okay, and then let's stop it here. Okay, we'll wait 3 seconds. You can see it's not firing anymore. Now let's start it again. So the counter, we don't have a way to reset the counter currently, so it's going to show us 4 times, but let's wait 1, 2, 3 seconds, and there it goes. Okay, so now it's working. We can stop and start our function, and we can reset it as well, and this will stop the loop from going, which is important because you don't want to keep hitting your counter unless you need to. I also did want to mention up here in our timer, I have it set to repeats true. If I only wanted it to fire, for example, 1 time, I would just say repeats false. And that way it would only hit it once instead of over and over again. Okay, but that's how that would work. And this is, of course, a very simple example, just kind of show you what you can do with these intervals. So to show what happens if you did want to say count up to a certain something, you can then have it do a function. Next, let's look at how we can give the user some feedback that the timer was actually completed. So before we go in and play with our storyboard over here, how can we do this in the code? So let's say after the 3 seconds has gone by, we want to give the user some kind of notification sound or maybe some kind of haptic feedback that it is completed. And it's actually quite simple to do that here. So I'm not going to touch my action right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to my timer complete. And so we're still going to keep the counter going just to kind of have a visual indicator. But there is a way we can give feedback to the user. And we can actually just say, okay, so WK interface device, as you can see here. And we can say interface device dot current. It returns the shared device object dot play. And as you can see here, play will do a type of WK haptic type. Okay, so we'll say WK haptic type. And then as usual, when you say dot, it shows you a bunch of autocomplete options here. So if we do notification, for example, as we see, alerts the user to an arrive notification when the watch app is not running in the foreground. So we could see what this does. I'm not sure if you'll be able to hear this on your end, but this will basically have like a little sound associated with it, a little ding sound. Once 3 seconds have gone by, because we set it to 3 seconds. In fact, it's going to hit it every 3 seconds because we have it set to return a repeat true here. So 1, 2, 3, and I just heard a little ding, so I know that it's working. And one way we can also do haptic feedback is if we say .click. So this is like a simple click type of feedback. So, the watch would kind of vibrate a little bit on the wrist. So that would be useful, of course, if someone does have a stopwatch, for example, and they want to use it as such. This is probably the kind of thing you would want to do. So WK haptic type .click, and you can kind of play around with the other options as well. And then you can maybe test it out on your own watch, because of course you can't really simulate vibration in the simulator. It doesn't really do anything. So just to show you, once it loads up here, it would be nice if it kind of shook or something like that, but unfortunately it doesn't have that capability, at least at this point. Okay, so we'll load that up, and we'll start. 1, 2, 3, and at this point it would be vibrating, and now, and it would just keep vibrating over and over. So you probably only want to do it once, so you know what, I'm just going to put this to repeats false, so that it only triggers this the one time. And of course, you can kind of tailor this however you see fit. And at this point, it would really be up to you. So how do you want to change the appearance of your watch face? Probably want to add some kind of indicator for the actual timer you want to keep track of. In which case, it would be not too different from the timers we previously did. And then you can maybe have the user select from some preset options like 10 seconds, 20 seconds, whatever it may be. And then you would just have to kind of adjust your logic in here. If you wanted to maybe keep track of your timer so that users can pause and then restart with the timer kept track of, well, we would just have to kind of figure out that logic in here in our if-else statement. So it wouldn't be too different from this part. So let's figure out how we can do that. So First of all, I'm only going to be firing it once. I'm going to get rid of this counter variable, and that means I'm going to get rid of it in my function down here as well. Okay, and instead we will just say timer function hit, so that we know that it does fire. Also, we are going to change the future time interval to be 10 seconds, so that it's kind of easier to test out. If we stop at halfway and restart it, there should only be 5 seconds left in the timer. So down here in our else statement, we can say, because we have calculated our elapsed time, and this is going to be a negative number, so what we can say is future equals future plus elapsed time. And this will allow us to kind of keep track of where we are. Basically the same as we're doing with our elapsed time, we're just using it on our future time interval instead. So let's try it out. Here we go, let's launch it. Alrighty, so it's just loading up here. And this would obviously be useful for many reasons, right? When you have a time, a stopwatch, it's useful to be able to kind of pause it and reset it. So here we'll go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'll stop it about here. So now this should fire our timer function once 5 more seconds elapse. Let's try it out. 9. Okay, it kind of got lost in the shuffle of other stuff here, but I see here that it was hit, timer function hit. Okay, so that's good. Let's also be able to reset it. So if we hit the reset button, we'll reset this variable future to be 10.0 again. Future equals 10.0. Okay, and now we can try it out a couple times just to kind of be sure that it is working exactly as intended. Right, that's the life of a software dev, is a lot of testing, right? So wait for this to load up here. There it goes, pretty quick that time. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll let it get to maybe 8 or 9. Okay, stop, start it. There I saw that it was hit right here. Let's reset it. We'll do it again. Just kind of be double sure. 5, 6, 7, stop, start. There we go. So it is working as intended, and now we have a lot more functionality out of our timer app.